We know that a 4-day ceasefire has been announced from 7 a.m. today. We know that that 4-day ceasefire was implemented rather imminently following those ceasefire taking hold of Gaza ahead of hostages being released, who are going to be released rather imminently. We're also waiting aid to enter the enclave. Sophie Mogwena, SABC's international editor, also joins us live to unpack what is unfolding, the implications they are for the region, the geopolitical landscape, and really, trust as a factor coming in as we look at some of the adherences to the international law, the role of some of the allies associated on both sides of the conflict, and where to from here, given that humanitarian crisis that, of course, is unfolding. So just live on your screens, we're going to rehash what has transpired. We know that, as I mentioned, the world is waiting with bated breath as hostages are set to be released, according to the ceasefire that had been announced, kicking in at 7 a.m. Red Cross and Egyptian security officials, a delegation, in fact, is going to be overseeing that release. So we know that they are at the Rafah crossing just earlier on, after 4 o'clock. We saw the Prime Minister of Belgium, we saw the Prime Minister of Spain addressing the media, Prime Minister Alexander De Croo from Belgium and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez from Spain, unpacking, what is set to transpire. Also just giving some of their thoughts on what has transpired to date and really where to from here. So some of the sentiments that had emerged beyond the Rafah crossing, we know that there have been calls for more access points beyond Egypt. This is to get much needed aid into Gaza, given that humanitarian crisis. There were also calls for the recognition of the state of Palestine, both Belgium and Spain having championed that and acknowledged that, so accepted that as well. So we'll obviously to monitor developments from here into. We're still awaiting reactions from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with regards to what's transpired after, he was reported to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity and war crimes against humanity, rather. So some of the dynamics unfolding at this point as we await that hostages to be released. So we do understand, with information at this point at our disposal, that 13 of the first hostages are expected to be released rather imminently. And they, in fact, will be brought forth through Egypt. They're going to be transferred to Israel as soon as they touch down Israel. All right, so hostages in Gaza, in fact, news just coming in, have been transferred to the Red Cross. We know that the Red Cross and the Egyptian security delegation are overseeing that. So they're on their way to the Rafah crossing for that to happen. It means that Israel, of course, has received that 13 of the first hostages who were expected to be released. And in turn, they have released some of the Palestinian hostages. In total, 24 women and 15 teenagers in occupied West Bank at that military prison are set to be announced. So Sophie Mogwena, in fact, also joins us. Sophie, we're obviously witnessing a rather emotional, historic moment in time. This has been ongoing since the 7th of October, in fact, after that attack by Hamas. But 48 days later, this is what we're witnessing as we await those hostages to be released.
Yes, quite an emotional day. When I listened to the two prime ministers, you could see that they were holding that pain when they were answering questions in terms of what they experienced on the ground. You can imagine with journalists, since the 7th of October, journalists have spent sleepless nights bringing this story, and they become part of the story in terms of their own system, how they feel, dealing with those cops and the people who are injured. And so many journalists have died. We haven't even touched on the story of the journalists who have died while they are reporting on this story. And therefore, it is an emotional moment. I think it even gets more emotional when you are waiting and waiting. As you can see on the other screen, you are waiting to see what's going to happen. Movement on the hostages. On the other side, you saw the buses at the prison also moving in. We are waiting to see the Palestinians getting in those buses and leaving the prison. And behind the scenes, there's constant communication. Every meter, the steps that each side takes, the other one must also take 10 steps. We are at the gate, move them to the next gate. We are now on the road 10 kilometers away, start bringing in buses. So you can imagine the tension, the anxiety, and these are human beings. You can imagine their families, particularly those who are fully aware that their loved ones will not be part of this first bash. And also what came as a surprise is when Sarah said that you have Thailand citizens who were released by Hamas. I think it was an unexpected act from their side. And you can see that some of the decisions are also based on what kind of relations we have with particular countries. We heard that the Americans will not be part of the first hostages who will be released. You can already see the message there that you Americans, you are failing to assist in this situation. So we are going to keep you waiting. So it's a very, and the Americans were also hoping that maybe one or two of their citizens will be part of this. So it's quite tense, and you don't know. It's getting dark. You don't know what's going to happen at night. We've heard from Sarah that in the north, much as there's this truce, 2 people have been killed and others injured when they were trying to go back and check their houses, and it's such a painful story, and it comes just after COVID-19 was traumatic to the entire human race. The war in Ukraine is traumatic to the entire human race. You have this one. We don't know what's next.
No, absolutely, Sophie. You make a rather pertinent point about, it getting darker and how this is also set to obviously affect dynamics, especially the cameras who are bringing us those live visuals on your screens. But we did have breaking news coming in. Israeli hostages have been freed in that swap deal. So this ultimately means that as we speaking, Sophie, 13 of those first hostages who were expected to be released have now touched down on Israeli soil. And in exchange, we know that Israel is releasing 39 Palestinian hostages from the military prison. So they're on their way to the Rafah crossing, and the Red Cross delegation, the Egypt security delegation, they're fostering that. They're making sure that that is obviously going to be adhered to as per the terms and conditions of that ceasefire. And, one can only imagine what a moment this is going to be for families on both sides, given, that they haven't seen each other 48 days and counting. What emotional distress they're under, what condition they are in, how well they were looked after, and all of these questions are coming to the fore. And in terms of those 12 Thai hostages as well that you alluded to earlier on, who had also been released by Hamas, which took an unexpected turn on their side. So that was something that was unaccounted for. You spoke about the need for communication, or how communication is happening at every step of the way, given the severity of what we're witnessing live on our screens at this point, and what is happening in terms of those negotiations and dynamics that also unfolding. You spoke about trust as well coming to the fore, and international humanitarian law that's also been vehemently highlighted from both the prime ministers during that briefing as this was all set to unfold. Some calling for a permanent ceasefire. Sarah alluding to the fact that there could be an extension of the ceasefire, though, by up to 10 days. What do you think is going to actually happen from here into?
I don't think any media house there's going to be a pause tonight in terms of the story.
Yes.
The whole world is looking at media houses to give a comprehensive update in terms of what's going to happen. At the same time, the families are waiting, and the media must also be there to see those emotional moments. But the problem is, how do you move forward? If you were to achieve a permanent ceasefire, how do you move forward? Who is better placed to facilitate the talks? Because what we saw now was almost like people just volunteering to assist, but there must be a formal way of dealing with these issues. Secondly, you spoke about the Prime Minister of Israel.
Yep.
You know that his future was hanging in the balance after he made those judicial changes. He was very unpopular, but this assisted him. That is why people are even saying he did prolong this, because he was trying to use this to undo the damage in terms of those changes in the judiciary. But he is still unpopular. He is still unpopular, and therefore this is something that must be taken into consideration, whether that is why he had to put together an interim government, bringing in other people so that there's no dissent. And therefore, there's so much happening. In Palestine, you have the Palestinian Authority in West Bank. You have Gaza under Hamas. Will Hamas allow a situation where they hand over power? It's a very, very complex matter.
No, absolutely, Sophie. And I think there are more questions than answers at this point, just given what is transpiring and really where to from here as the world watches looks at the atrocities that have occurred over the past 48 days, let alone the history that preceded that. And what this is also going to mean for the future of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the United States of America President Joe Biden. We're also seeing, a number of other countries also playing their role in adding pressure to this dynamic that we're obviously witnessing on our screens. You can see that there is a military control vehicle backing up there. One is to wonder if, they're going to be collecting hostages and putting them into Rafah crossing. Sophie, how would you observe what's happening there?
You can see this is an Israeli flag at the gate.
Yes.
It is the prison. Now, you saw the two buses getting in. So
yes.
Here, this is where the Palestinian citizens will be released. And I think that military vehicle will be an escort, because I saw two buses. And when you think about the number of prisoners, you can see that this might be at that moment, because as we pointed out, breaking news that hostages freed in a swap deal. But it was always going to be Israel saying, okay, you've moved, we can move. You've moved, we can move. So it is. That is why I'm saying it's so difficult. It's taking toll, I think, to many other people. I don't even want to imagine the people who are involved, the hostages and the prisoners. And these are women and children. The most vulnerable in the society. Some of them, when they go back, they are not going to find their parents. Some of them, when they go back, they are not going to find their children. They are not going to find their houses. It's a human tragedy.
Which actually brings me to a question that just arose. What happens from here into once those hostages are released? One can only imagine the psychosocial support that's going to be needed. Some of the other basic needs that will have to be met, given that on the Palestinian side they were in prison, and obviously the Israeli hostages who are hopefully also going to be returning to their families.
That is why the Red Cross is there to assist with such challenges, because the institution Red Cross is better equipped to deal with such incidents. Don't forget, we might be focusing on Israel and Gaza right now, but you have similar challenges in Ukraine and with the border with Russia. You have similar challenges in Sudan. Neighboring countries can't cope. You have similar challenges in the DRC. So the Red Cross and international organization, they are well equipped to deal with such incidents. They know very well where to from here. And that is why they will be taken to different hospitals, both sides.
Well, we're also speaking about the assistance that's obviously going to be on offer. Some of the security concerns that come to the fore with those who are volunteering or those who are going to be providing aid and relief, knowing that 4 days is not enough to address the mammoth crisis that's unfolding there. What do you think those operations are going to be looking like, given some of the talks you've had with those who are in the area?
As I pointed out when I spoke to Moti earlier on, number of trucks were able to move in. We expect more trucks tomorrow. And of course, on Sunday and Monday is the deadline. You had Sarah saying that there can be an extension of 10 days. There was there was a room to do that. Maybe we are going to see that extension, because also when you see these visuals, I think in relation to Israel, the Americans behind the scenes watching this as it turns out or pan out, I think many people around the world will see things differently. They will have a better sense of what needs to happen. In short, people saying, guys, we can't continue with this. I mean, you saw the two prime ministers. They were very emotional.
Yes, no, absolutely, Sophie. And we're monitoring developments, in fact, live on your screens. Just to rehash very quickly what has transpired to date. We know that Israeli hostages have been freed in a swap deal. So just to give you some context to that, it means 13 of those first hostages were released. They've touched down on Israeli soil. Mediated by a delegation from the Red Cross and the Egyptian security authorities, they will be facilitating that exchange. So we do know that 24 women and 15 teenagers in occupied West Bank, they were at a military prison there. They, in fact, are going to be released. They're going to be handed over to the Red Cross and Egyptian delegation and at the Rafah crossing. And this is how that exchange is going to be happening. Sophie spoke about the constant communication that is happening as you speak. And on our screens, we've seen the day change into night, early evening, in fact, as that is still underway. So we'll continue to bring you all of these dynamics unfolding on the SABC. We do know that beyond the hostages being removed, we also are going to be having much needed aid provided to Gaza. There have been some fears and concerns about those who in fact want to go into the northern parts of Gaza, citing some fears around the stability over there. But we're monitoring developments from here in too, as we await hostages on both sides to be freed in that swap deal. In fact, more of them to be freed. So I'm actually now going to be handing over to my colleagues at the Full View desk. They are going to continue to bring you the latest as we watch the ceasefire, the terms and conditions play out as the hostages are freed in that swap deal. Of course, we do know that that 4-day ceasefire began today, 7 a.m. It's going to be lasting for 4 days rather. 50 women and children from Palestine are said to be released rather imminently. This obviously follows the 13 Israeli hostages, the first of which were released and have officially touched down on Israeli soil.